One of the things that's different about leaders compared to managers is that managers are really concerned with the task. Efficiency, measurement, progress, that sort of thing. Whereas leaders, if they're any good, will be more concerned with the people, inspiring the people to achieve the task. And I think it's really easy to be drawn into all the tasks when you're running a company or running a department or managing even a small team, to get dragged into the task of how do we get this number up? How do we improve this number? So I want to say a few things in this section about focusing on the people rather than the task. So let's get started on that. The inspirational leader sees their role as building a machine of people. Now that's a weird thing to say, but what they should be doing is standing back and working on the machine, not working in the machine. So everything really is a machine of people. It's people connected by processes. And the leader's job is to look at that and think, that bit there isn't really working very well. Is it the person, or is something falling between the cracks? Is it the way they work together? Maybe they don't get on. Is communication not good enough? So just always thinking about the machine itself. So not getting in and thinking, I'll do that job, it needs doing. But to think, why is that not being done? How do I improve the machine so that gets done? If you can get the machine of people working well, then the tasks will look after themselves. So your job's to think about the machine. And a large part of that is coaching, which we've already talked about. Making sure that the people within the machine are as good as they can be. And then there's how they link together. And then you're into systems thinking. I'd really recommend a book actually called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge, S-E-N-G-E. It's not the easiest book to read, it's quite advanced and clever, but it is fascinating. And he goes into the systems of why things happen. He talks about, for example, if there's a time lag between what people do and what happens, then they really struggle to cope with that. And in fact, I can't cope with a time lag of even 3 seconds when I'm in the shower and it's a bit hot. I turn it down and nothing happens. I turn it down a bit more and suddenly it's freezing cold. So then I turn it back up and nothing happens, and I'm swinging between the two. So even a 5-second time lag, but imagine if you've got a time lag of a year from when you do something at work to the effect it has. If you tweak the bonus structure or something like that, and it takes a year, or if you get new machines in the factory, it might take a year before they're operating properly. And during that time, management are thinking, no, turn it up some more, it's still not working, turn it up some more, and then they end up overcooking it. So systems thinking is fascinating, and that's only one of the ideas, the time lag idea. So the good leader is standing back and is thinking, I need to understand this system. So a simple example of systems thinking is this diagram I've got for you here. So what we've got in this diagram is the rectangle is the area that you are in charge of, and the 3 circles are the areas of responsibility of 3 people who work for you. Now, can you see the 3 problems in this diagram? I usually find that people can see 2 of them. The first one that's obvious is where there's an overlap between person A and person B. They both think that they're in charge of that particular part of the job. And that's a problem, because if they're both responsible for it, then either they're going to argue or they're going to keep changing the way it's done when the other person's not there. Or they'll think, oh, the other person's doing it, and then they won't do it, and it may fall between the cracks. So you don't want to have any overlap. Everything should be down to just one person. So even watering the rubber plant in reception, if you've got a morning and an afternoon receptionist, don't put them both in charge of the rubber plant. One of them looks after the rubber plant. Okay, so no overlap. The second problem, you can probably see how one of the people, their responsibility goes outside the rectangle. So something that they are doing is not for you, it's for another manager. And that's going to be a problem, because that person now has 2 bosses. So either that little bit needs to be cut off and given to somebody else who works for that other manager, or your empire needs to be expanded slightly to cover that bit as well. But you shouldn't have people who work for you doing things that some other manager is responsible for. That's just messy. But can you see the third problem area? And the third area is that there are some parts of the rectangle that are not covered by the circles at all. So the people who work for you are covering various things, but there's some stuff that nobody covers, so you have to do it. And there shouldn't be anything that only you are looking after, because you should have delegated everything. So the key is to think about people's job roles so that they cover everything. Now, I've deliberately used ovals and rectangles because I wanted to make the point that it's really difficult to make sure that everything gets covered by these ovals or these circles. But that's what you've got to do. And of course, in real life, it's worse than this because people leave and get replaced by another one. So just when you've got everything perfectly worked out, somebody leaves and a new person comes in and then your thing's completely messed up again. And also people get bored. So they want their circle to be moving across into a new area and they're bored by some of it. And you're thinking, well, no, I need you to cover that area. But of course, you don't want people to be bored. So the game is that in this ever-moving diagram of circles, you want to have everything covered with no overlaps. And that's a full-time job, but that's part of what you need to be doing if you're going to be a great leader. And then you need contingency planning. So I think there are several ways to do this. First of all, a skills matrix. So you've got at least 2 people to cover everything. So if somebody else leaves, then you're definitely going to still be okay. So you want to make sure you've got people trained up. If there's only one person who can do something, that's risky. You need to train up somebody else. Then there's succession planning. Who could step up if needed? If somebody left, probably somebody who works for them, but it might not be, who could move up into that job. And you always need to have at least one person able to step up into any job if something happened to that person, if they left or became ill or got promoted. So succession planning is important to think about. And finally, career planning. And that's only if people want it, because some people are happy just doing a job forever, but you should definitely give the option of talking about career planning. What's the next step for them? And when do they want to make that step? Maybe they'd like to have another year of doing what they're doing before they make that next step up. And then you can think about what's needed first. If I'm going to get that person to move on up, what sort of training do they need? What sort of experience do they need? How are we going to give them that so they can make that step up? And people love it if you help them plan their career, because it shows that you really care about them as people. You're not just using them for what they do at the moment. So it's really important. If you want to be an inspirational leader, your people have got to believe that you care about them for their whole life and you're going to look after them for their career. And if it means them leaving the company for their own good, for their career, that you'll be fine with that, because above all, you care about them as people. So when you're thinking about where someone could go, there could be several places in the company that they could go to next. And there could be several people who could succeed any one person. So your career planning and succession diagram could be pretty complicated. Several into one, one into several, but it's really important to think about this. So those are some of the thoughts that you should have. And you might want to think about the people that you've got who work for you now. Have they all got a career plan? Have you got somebody who could replace any of them if they were to leave?